Disclaimer: this program is not intended for JavaScript developers. We teach real programming languages, not work miracles. Greetings, and as you can probably tell, I am not Jesco, but you are watching Game Dev Made Easy. The video for today is a Unity-specific video that will be about creating a multi-monitor display for a single game. Well, okay then, I guess we'll both learn something. What is meant by this is take a look at a Nintendo DS, the old punch-out arcade cabinet, or the Nintendo 3DS for how a single game can utilize multiple monitors to display information on one screen and the actual gameplay on another. Oh, okay, I think I get it. This is actually a recreation of an old video with a much better PC setup and more in-depth information. A viewer of mine, Jesco's, actually asked about the video, and this is what spawned the idea to revisit that old video and give a better example of what is happening. Before we get into it, we first need to understand exactly what we will be doing and how to go about implementing it. Multi-monitor displays refer to having more than one monitor being displayed to simultaneously while being able to directly control input on one or both monitors. Generally, in games that incorporate the usage of multi-display monitor modes, what happens is useful information is displayed in either the top or bottom monitor, generally the bottom, and the actual gameplay occurs in the opposite monitor, generally the top monitor. Now, with PCs, the configuration varies greatly. Some people might have a setup that has a stacked monitor setup, and others will have a configuration where the monitors are side by side, and this is just taking a dual monitor configuration into account. With all of that out of the way, let's cue the intro animation and music.
Hello! It's Andy again from the EgoCast Channel, and
I have already created an empty project, as we can see here, and Unity already has everything set up for a sample scene. We will go ahead and expand upon this to build this project. Now the first thing we need to do is create a secondary camera. We need to change the camera mode to be orthographic and set the display to be display 2. The reason for this is we want this display to not only show up on a secondary screen and not the main display and be drawn over by the main camera. The next item on the list is to change the camera's position to be absurdly out of range of anything that could be on the screen at any given time. The X position will be 425439, the Y position will be 16713, and the Z position will be at negative 5.45. This is so no items or effects will bleed over into the secondary screen unless you want it to. Next up, we want to create a canvas for it to be a child of the secondary camera. This is purely for organizational reasons. The canvas should be set to render mode screen space camera and make sure the render camera is the secondary camera. We don't want this to be drawn on the main camera at all. Create a panel to be a child of the canvas. So this is so we have the option to make the background color to be different from the main camera's render view. We can change the color if we want by changing the panel's color to be a solid value for whatever you want. Next up, create 4 buttons and set them to be the child of the panel. The text of each button should be drop cylinders, drop capsules, drop cubes, and drop spheres respectively. This is just so the organization, just to organize and be able to know what each button is supposed to do in the scenario. page fucking 2. The next step is create a prefabs folder. In the hierarchy pane, create a cube, capsule, cylinder, and sphere. Make sure all of them have the rigid body component attached to them. We want gravity to affect them. This will be important later. Drag and drop the cube, capsule, cylinder, and sphere into the prefabs folder and delete them from the hierarchy pane. Let's create our scripts folder next. The 3 scripts we will create will be destroy by time, drop scripts, and multi-display code. We are going to utilize all of these very soon. As you can see, each of them have been named according to what their purpose should be. Drag and drop the multi-display code script onto the main camera. We could create an empty game object to be our manager item, but we don't really need it for something like this. On the secondary camera, drag and drop the drop scripts into it. The last thing we need to do in the editor for now is go into our prefabs folder and left click on the cube we created, click on add component. Highlight scripts and select the destroy by time script and add the script to the prefab. We will do this for the capsule, cylinder, and sphere as well. Now double click on the multi-display code script to open it up in Visual Studio.
So what is up, guys? Musical Anti-Hero segment doing things with you, my sexalicious audience. Bloom transition, the birds get the hell out of there. It's a medium shot, pan zoom, and slow-mo means he's a target. Mysterious. Okay, sorry. Focused. Like a butterfly. Butterflies don't focus. Okay. Delete the comments in the update function from the multi-display code script. We only really need the start method, so we don't need to have the superfluous code and comments remaining there. We will create a loop within the start method. I don't know how to display that. For int I is set to 0. I is less than display dot displays dot length. I++. This for loop will loop through all of the active displays that are available on the system. I really hope I said that right. Now, write the following. Display.displays bracket I.activate. This will make sure the displays we have available are now activated if they are needed. That is all we need to do in the multi-display code script. Now let's move over to the destroy by time script just to get that out of the way. Delete the comments and update function from this class as well. Again, redundant comments and code just aren't needed here. Above the start method, write public float lifetime is set to 1.5 float. This will designate how long we want the objects to stay alive in the hierarchy pane for in-game viewing. Inside of the start method, write destroy parentheses game object, comma, lifetime. This will remove the game object by the time we specified. That completes the destroy by time script. Sorry. Oh man, very sorry. Now we can move on to the final script, which is the drop script. Delete the start method, comments, and the update method. None of this is going to be used at all. The first thing we need to do is to create a public list of game objects called drop items. This will house the sphere, cylinder, capsule, and cube from within the editor. Now, write the following. Private void drop item with the parameters set to be string name. We are creating this method to do all of the legwork, but still allow us to call it in public methods with the name of the item we want to use. To put it bluntly, it follows the dry and kiss principles, which are don't repeat yourself and keep it simple, stupid. Or if you're fabulous, keep it simple, sexy. Next up, create a var called xminmax, and it will be set to random.range with the parameters being -10 and +10. This will set the horizontal axis to have a specific range that the items will be able to spawn in. I can't believe I did that with like a millimeter of tea in my mouth. What the hell? Vector3 Spawnposition is the next thing to write, and that will be set to a new Vector3 value of xminmax 10 and 0 float. This will be the vector position we will utilize for the spawned game objects. Quaternion spawn rotation is set to quaternion.identity. This is for the rotation of our spawned game objects to be set to the identity of the game objects, which just means that the rotation is set to 1. Next on our list is to create a for each loop. For each var item in drop items is what we will write. We are iterating through all of the game objects within the list we just created. Now, inside of the for each loop, we will create an if statement. If item.name is equal to name. We want to single out a specific item from within that list, which will be evident why in the steps following this method. Inside of that if statement, write the following. For int I is set to 0. If I is less than 100, I++. We want to create 100 of the item in question, but you can change the value to be whatever you want it to be. Inside of the loop, write, instantiate, okay. Inside of the loop, write instantiate item, spawn position, spawn rotation. And now we instantiate. And now we instantiate the items to actually be called in-game. This completes the drop item method. This method handles the creation and selection backend code that we need to have game objects spawn in the game. Now we will create our next method, public void drop sphere. This will be called by the button press of the drop sphere button. Inside of this method, write drop item with the string value of sphere being the parameter. Next up, we will create a public void drop cylinder method, and as you guessed, it will be called by the drop cylinder button. Write drop item with the string value of cylinder as the parameter. The third one is public void drop cube. Now inside, write drop item with the string parameter being cube. And the final one, of course, is public void drop capsule. Inside, write drop item with the string parameter being capsule. You can now see exactly why we have the drop item method have the string name parameter and the check for the item's name being equal to name. This drastically reduces the amount of code we would have to write and allows for us to make modifications for more items or changes in those items in the future. If you find yourself repeating something, there is smell in your code, and you should rectify that as quickly as possible. No idea what smell is. There's smell in your code. There's something smelly in your code? I don't know. There's smell in your code. Okay. I assume it's a programming thing that's over my head. This is a problem that many beginners and most programmers that don't think about proper coding conventions face when writing code. If you aren't convinced, look at it from this perspective. The drop item method would have about 7 lines of code without the for each loop or the if check. This method would have to be written 3 more times along with the list becoming individual game objects. In the GitHub repo that will be linked in the description below, we have a script called Bad Way which will showcase the difference for you. You will see that the same thing being repeated and the total length of 59 lines of code versus the drop script, which has 46 lines of code. Anyway, let's save talking about the scripts and jump back into the Unity editor. Now, click on the secondary camera and you will see drop items in the drop script. The current size is set to 0, so let's change that size to be 4. Drag and drop your prefabs of the capsule, cube, cylinder, and sphere into the list. This will tie the prefabs to the list and not make the values null or 0. Click on the first button, click on the plus sign under the on-click option. Now, drag the secondary camera onto it, click on the functions option, locate drop scripts, and select drop cube. This will make it so that the drop cubes button will drop the cubes. Now, click on the second button and do the same thing, only instead of selecting drop cube, select drop sphere. Click on the third button, do the same steps and select drop cylinder. Now, click on the fourth button, perform the same steps, and this time select drop capsule. Click on file and save the scene. Now, for the final step, click on file and build settings. We are building for PC, Mac, and Linux standalone for this example. Select build, create a folder called build and select that folder. Unity will build the project. Once it's finished building, it will open the folder that houses those build files. Now, double-click on the exe file for the project and select display to when the dialog box comes up. You can change the display size to be whatever you want it to be, and then click run. We now have a working example of a multi-monitor display-enabled Unity game. Like we said before, this has been the musical antihero for Jesco with an update to an older video. If you like this version of the older one, why don't you give the video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We want to give a warm shout out to all of Jesco's Patreon supporters who have chosen to give some of their hard-earned money for the content we produce here. It means a lot and continues to inspire us in delivering content on YouTube, since we just don't have those 4,000 watch hours and the 1,000 subscriber count that YouTube wants for us to monetize our videos. I'm just going to throw this little last bit in. If you want to include it, you don't have to include it, but I'm going to throw it in. And hey, as I said, I'm the musical antihero. I'm not Jesco. I'm a different guy. But if you wanna see some of the stuff I do, I talk about ethics and quality control in games journalism with a little bit of comedy on the side. You can pop over to my channel. We're talking about Steam's brand new rules and kind of how it screwed the pooch on those. Screwed it pretty good. Yeah, got it in deep. It's good to know about Steam once you make games, so you can sell games. And then you'll know what people think of your games, because you watched my video. And now you'll know. Circle of life. Get with the program. That's all I got. Personally, right now we're building for personal computer, Mac, and Linux standalone for this example. I'm really just kind of throw my hat out and assume this is Quaternion, the Quartering, Magic the Gathering. Okay, quarter, not quarter, quarter. Okay, Quaternion, Quarterfalls, Quaternion. This is really hard. This will set the horizontal axis to have a specific range that the items will be able to spawn in. I can't believe I did that with like a millimeter of tea in my mouth. What the hell? Vector3 Spawnposition is the next thing to write, and that will be set to a new Vector3 value of x, min, max, 10, and 0 float. This will be the vector position we will utilize for the spawned game objects. I'm really just kind of throw my hat out and assume this is Quaternion, the Quartering, Magic the Gathering. Okay, quarter, not quarter, quarter. Okay, Quaternion, Quarterfalls, Quaternion. This is really hard. Quaternion spawn rotation is set to Quaternion.identity. This is for the rotation of our spawned game objects to be set to the identity of the game objects, which just means that the rotation is set to 1. Next on our list is to create a for each loop. For each var item in drop items is what we will write. We are iterating, was what I was about to say. Brr. We are iterating through all of the game objects within the list we just created. Now, inside of the for each loop, we will create an if statement. If item.name is equal to name. We want to single out a specific item from within that list. My keyboard is creaking. We want to single out a specific item from within that list, which will be evident why in the steps following this method. Inside of that if statement, write the following. For int I is set to 0. If I is less than 100, I++. We want to create 100 of the item in question, but you can change the value to be whatever you want it to be. Inside of the loop, write, instantiate. Okay. Inside of the loop, write instantiate item, spawn position, spawn rotation. And now we instantiate. And now we instantiate the items to actually be called in-game. This completes the drop item method. This method handles the creation and selection backend code that we need to have game objects spawn in the game. Now we will create our next method, public void drop sphere. This will be called by the button press of the drop sphere button. Inside of this method, write let me just redo those two sentences. This will be called by the button press of the drop sphere button. Inside of this method, write drop item with the string value of sphere being the parameter. Dry throat. I need my cup of tea. Oh, it's hot. It's still really hot. Next up, we will create a public void drop cylinder method. And, as you guessed, it will be called by the drop cylinder button. Write drop item with the string value of cylinder as the parameter. The third one is public void drop cube. Let me redo that one because I had it gurgling in my throat. The third one is public void drop cube. The third one is public void drop cube. Now inside, write drop item with the string parameter being cube. And the final one, of course, is public void drop capsule. Inside, write drop item with the string parameter being capsule. You can now see exactly why we have the drop item method have the string name parameter and the check for the item's name being equal to name. This drastically reduces the amount of code we would have to write and allows for us to make modifications for more items or changes in those items in the future. This is something you should always think about when writing any kind of code. If you find sorry. If you find yourself repeating something, there is smell in your code, and you should rectify that as quickly as possible. No idea what smell is. There's smell in your code. There's something smelly in your code? I don't know. There's smell in your code. Okay. I assume it's a programming thing that's over my head. This is a problem that many beginners and a problem that programmers don't... Ooh. Okay, that's a weird sentence. This is a problem that many beginners and those programmers that don't think about proper coding conventions when writing code often encounter. Let me read you that sentence again. This is a problem that many beginners and several programmers that don't think about proper coding. My syncopation went off there. This is a problem that many beginners and most programmers that don't think about proper coding conventions face when writing code. Now, if you aren't convinced, look at it from this perspective. I've got rid of that from horizontal, and now my throat's all dried out. Okay. If you aren't convinced, look at it from this perspective. The drop item method would have about 7 lines of code without the for each loop or the if check. This method would have to be written 3 more times along with the list becoming individual game objects. In the GitHub repo that will be linked in the description below, we have a script called Bad Way, which will showcase the difference for you. You will see that the same thing being repeated and the total length of 59 lines of code versus the drop script, which has 46 lines of code. Let me read you that sentence. In it, you'll see the same thing being repeated, and the total length of 59 lines of code for this method versus the drop script method, which only has 46 lines of code. Anyway, let's save talking about the scripts and jump back into the Unity editor. Now, click on the secondary camera and you will see drop items in the drop script. The current size is set to 0, so let's change that size to be 4. Drag and drop your prefabs of the capsule, cube, cylinder, and sphere into the list. This will tie the prefabs to the list and not make the values null or 0. Click on the first button, click on the plus sign under the on-click option. Now, drag the secondary camera onto it, click on the functions option, locate drop scripts, and select drop cube. This will make it so that the drop cubes button will drop the cubes. Now, click on the second button and do the same thing, only instead of selecting drop cube, select drop sphere. Click on the third button and do the same steps for the drop sphere. Oh. Wait, hold on. Drop cube, sphere. Oh, capsule. Capsule, cylinder. Yeah, okay. Click on the third button, do the same steps, and select drop cylinder. Now, click on the fourth button, perform the same steps, and this time select drop capsule. Click on File and save the scene. Now, for the final step, click on File and Build Settings. Personally, right now we're building for personal computer, Mac, and Linux standalone for this example. Currently, we're building for PC, Mac, and Linux. It's a great pumpkin. Sorry. We're building for PC, Mac, and Linux. Linux standalone. We are building for PC, Mac, and Linux standalone for this example. Select Build. Create a folder called Build and select that folder. Unity will build the project. Once it's finished building, it will open the folder that houses those build files. Now, double-click on the exe file for the project and select Display To when the dialog box comes up. You can change the display size to be whatever you want it to be, and then click Run. We now have a working example of a multi-monitor display-enabled Unity game. Like we said before, this has been the musical antihero for Jesco with an update to an older video. If you like this version of the older one, why don't you give the video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We want to give a warm shout out to all of Jesco's Patreon supporters who have chosen to give some of their hard-earned money for the content we produce here. It means a lot and continues to inspire us in delivering content on YouTube, since we just don't have those 4,000 watch hours and the 1,000 subscriber count that YouTube wants for us to monetize our videos. I'm just going to throw this little last bit in. If you want to include it, you don't have to include it, but I'm going to throw it in. And, hey, as I said, I'm the musical end hero. I'm not Jesco. I'm a different guy. But if you want to see some of the stuff I do, I talk about ethics and quality control in games journalism with a little bit of comedy on the side. You can pop over to my channel. We're talking about Steam's brand new rules and kind of how it screwed the pooch on those. Screwed it pretty good. Yeah, got it in deep. It's good to know about Steam once you make games, so you can sell games, and then you'll know what people think of your games because you watched my video, and now you'll know. It's a circle of life. Get with the program. That's all I got. This will set the horizontal axis. This will set the. I feel like Scarface. This will set the horizontal. This will set the Luke, I am your father. I've been told that like singing it makes it easier to do. This will set the horizontal axis to have a specific range that the items will be able to spawn in. Okay, let me try that now. Without like the Tony Montana. Okay. This will set the Okay. Okay. This will set the I keep fucking sound like a fucking pig. God damn it. This will set the This will set the This will set the horse. Get the horse. Oh my god, I'm having so much trouble with horizontal. I didn't go there. What the hell? Okay, I'm gonna have a little sip of my tea so I don't fucking drive out my eyes with a fucking wooden stake. Okay.